Good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Look at that ticker's on time this morning. Everything's great. Good morning. Well, how was your last night? Did you check out the Cross Canada Relay, the Great Canadian Relay? It was a good one. We had everybody but BC show up, but now I've got more commitments out of BC. They want to be there. They want to be there. So next week, I think we should have a full plate. Good morning, Azaria. How you doing, buddy? Nice to see you. And there's my coffee. Hi, Clay. Hold on a second there. Chat lady. I need my coffee. Good to see you, Clay. Thank you very much for showing up, bud. Love the bear. Hey, Island Jason, bud. Yeah, you've come back so much, and you reached out to me. I definitely want to talk to you, and I think we'll bring you on for next week as well. That was pretty exciting. Thank you for showing up last night. And we have a really excellent episode for you today. I already have a full lobby. They're all here. So we're going to be getting going right away. And as you saw yesterday, we were going through that video with that OPP spokesperson. I'm not going to mention her name, but she kind of gave us some information way back when at the very beginning that we've now been able to check and cross-check and recheck and fully check. And a lot of Pinocchio nosing going on in there because that information has now been deemed very, very incorrect. And that was through the POEC, and that was through witness statements. So we're not just saying we don't like what she says. We've paid close attention to the details around this event, and we understand that the POEC, some of that contradicted her. She wasn't a witness at the POEC. Okay, we had someone else from the Alberta RCMP show up, so we couldn't cross-examine her or question her at all. But she was a spokesperson, so her job is to represent at the best of their ability at that time. And as we saw during that video, she started off strong, like really strong. You should listen to me. These are facts. Don't question me. Then in the middle, she started to get, very selective with the details and didn't have details. Started to turn into a member to members. So the details even started to change halfway through. And then by the end, take it up in court. You'll get the details in court. Wait for court. Started to be her responses. So she no longer had information to give. She no longer could answer the question being asked. So she just threw up the see you in court card. Now, as we know, the process is the penalty. Okay, so it's pretty important to have valid charges and to have the information up front as well, because the process can actually be a punishment. But her attitude in that was take it for what it is, what we say it is. Don't question us. Stop asking details. And if you want more, wait for a year or so while the court deals with it. Didn't like that at all. And then we decided we're going to go through Rick Abbott's video from the NCI, because he's basically the opposite of that. He was also a witness. He went and saw some things and reported back on that. And lucky for us, our own Donald Best already knew Rick. So Donald said, you know what? I'm still an old-fashioned police officer type dude. I pick up these things called a phone. Let's call that guy. You know what Rick said? With time, I'll be there. So Rick is here. So we get to speak to him instead of watching his video and commentating on it. We get to speak to the man himself. So I'd like to bring him in right now, along with Granny and Donald. Good morning, everybody. Hello, Rick. Good morning, Granny. Good morning, Donald. Morning. Look, we got the full plate today. It's great to see everybody. And Rick, do you mind if I put your Twitter handle onto your thing so people know how to find you?
No, not at all.
Okay, we'll get working on that as well. And then Granny, I'll get yours in as well, because we want to get you a lot of follows. So how is everybody this morning? I'll start with Rick, and then we'll go to our regulars. So good morning, Rick. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I sure appreciate it. Wide-eyed and bushy-tailed here. I think I'm a couple hours ahead of you, so don't mind me if I'm drinking a coffee at the same time.
Well, I'm in Alberta, so I'm not far from you. So you and I are drinking coffee nice and early. We have Donald, who's in Ontario, near the Toronto area. And then we, of course, have Granny. Let me find my stuff here. She's down there. She's also in Alberta. So the three of us are drinking our morning coffee. And thank you for joining us. Now, you're not at home right now. I think you mentioned that you're out doing something right now. Can you kind of let people know what you're up to?
I'm just out helping out with a youth camp where some kids are learning some hunter education courses. So it's a good time to get out here in early summer and be out in the wild outdoors.
Right on. So you're just south or southwest of Rocky Mountain House, which is not too far from me right now. And is that a faith-based camp, or is that just a kids camp?
Just a kids camp.
Well, I said just a kids camp. That's kind of rude of me, but yeah, it's not a faith-based one.
No.
But that's excellent. So they're learning survival skills and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, you bet. Hunter safety, which is, of course, includes all of the ecology around it. It's a good opportunity for kids to see how to take care of themselves in the bush.
Excellent. Any how to protest skills being learned?
No, this is a
No?
pretty singular topic here.
Well, I bet you, whether you realize it or not, some skills are being developed around that, because around respect, integrity, and other things. And I'm sure you're teaching some of that. So that's kind of cool. Yeah. So they're going to pick up a lot of life skills from someone like you. So that's a good thing. Good morning, Donald. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change the view to get you in the middle so we get to say hi to you nice and proper. And see that beard coming in. You're definitely coming in well.
It is. I've said I won't shave it off till the Coutts Four have a trial.
Granny said the same thing. So go, Granny.
What, Granny? You're growing a beard, are you?
I hope not.
She's not shaving until they're out. I believe that's what she said. So good job, Granny. That makes 3 of us, and maybe Rick will join us on that one. Thank you very much, Donald. And thank you again for joining last night as well. That was a nice episode, and having you there talk about Ontario was great. Thank you for that. And then Granny, good morning. So yeah, your beard's coming in nice and full and thick now. You're not going to be cold this winter.
I'm not going there.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Thank you as well for joining us yesterday. That was probably the most popular segment we've had on that show ever, because it was really hard-hitting information, and a lot of people still didn't know, even viewers of this show, because yesterday we had several people from across Canada join, and they're not necessarily watching our morning show, so they didn't know. So thank you very much for bringing all of that to light last night.
Yes, that seems to be the ongoing message. One, they either don't know about them, period, or they thought they were arrested and released. So
Right.
We'll just keep plugging forward and looking for the truth.
Well, the fact is, that's what everybody would assume would happen. Bail would happen. There would be some sort of conditions, and then we can move on to trial. So it is very odd to see them do this. Okay, so cool. So what I want to do is, because Rick has a lot to say and add to the context of what we're talking about here. And Rick, to give you an update, because you haven't seen an episode of this show yet, we're on episode 9, I believe. So we're on the second week on a Thursday now. We've been doing this every day since the 26th. What we're doing is we're reviewing the public information that we can gather on the Coutts Four situation, what happened before, what happened with the arrest, and what's happened since. We're doing our best to follow the truth, follow the evidence, because this is the right way to do it, and I'm sure you're going to talk a bit on that. Donald's been a very great asset to us, helping us make sure that we are staying cynical, keeping a critical eye, and every once in a while the devil's advocate pops up and reminds us that even though we're passionate and we have a lot of love for these gentlemen, what we want to make sure that we pay attention to is the information, the real information, the evidence, and then work our way through that. And yesterday what we did is we went through the press conference video from the RCMP, which basically laid out the narrative at that point that they wanted us to understand. And I believe maybe you started to come around after that or around that. So what we're going to do is we'll get into the details around your involvement with the Coutts situation and the Milk River. You went to go visit them. What we won't do today, because it's early and it's YouTube, is we won't be getting into a lot of the vaccine related stuff that you testified to on the NCI, but we definitely want to get into your take of the Coutts situation and Milk River stuff. So on that note, if you don't mind, Rick, I'm going to put you on the screen and you can introduce yourself, kind of tell people about who you were just before you became, infamous or famous, or however you want to look at this, about the situation. And then we'll get into taking you through your story and what happened to you. Thank you, Rick.
No, you bet. I was a 25-year staff sergeant with the Abbott Police Service in January of 2022, when I was suspended without pay. I was essentially pushed out of the Edmonton Police Service because of a couple of primary reasons that brought me to the attention of the executive officer team of the Edmonton Police Service. So the first thing that really happened that they didn't like about me, even though I had had a clean career, not just a clean career, but a very exciting career with the Edmonton Police Service that I'm very proud of to this day. Most of it spent on the tactical teams, firearms units, and patrol. But that came to a crashing end after I questioned why the employees that worked for me in one of the divisions in Edmonton were not allowed to eat in the lunchrooms because they were unvaccinated. So it was clearly not about the health or the science anymore. The people who were unvaccinated were bound to test every 4 days before they came to work. So on paper, those are the only ones that I knew were clean in my division, and yet they weren't allowed to eat with their squad mates. So this was clearly over the line to me. And I should also say, I was coerced. They tricked me into taking the drugs. Not long before that, I had finished taking my second dose. So I was coming from this from both sides, but I knew what I was seeing was aberrant. It was disgusting how they were treating my employees. So I made a formal complaint to the then Minister of Justice, Casey Madu. Of course, the executive officer team wouldn't have liked that.
Mm-hmm.
Then the reason that they said they suspended me for was a video that was posted on somebody's Facebook, and I've never been on Facebook. So
right.
I had spoke to Corporal Danny Bulford of the RCMP. I had determined in January that somebody was lying about the narrative around the COVID issues, whether it was the mainstream media or if it was these independent media sources that I was watching. But there was no middle ground on this anymore. So when I spoke to Danny Bulford when he was in Ottawa at the protests, he told me, Rick, don't believe me. Go see for yourself in Milk River. It'll be the same crowd that's here in Ottawa. And I did just that. When I was down there in Milk River, an impromptu group of 100 to 200 people had asked me to give a few words of encouragement to stay peaceful. And I did just that. I told the crowd that if you're peaceful, you're lawfully placed. You can be here. Somebody took a video of me giving that speech. It was a 3-minute speech, essentially saying that. When they posted it on their Facebook, it got back to the executives of the Abbott Police Service, and I was suspended without pay for having it attended there and having had posted on my social media those encouraging words, which of course violates Abbott Police Service policy. So that's what got me here today. I jokingly, tongue-in-cheek, said I was fired. Essentially, there was no hope. The unions weren't there for me. The union was essentially on the side of the service, saying, "Well, can't really do anything for you. Sorry, Rick. Yeah, we understand why you're retiring." They've got a figurative gun to your head over finances, and there's no hope. My union said, "Rick, there's no hope for you. The chiefs will keep you suspended for years. There's no hope in here, and we understand why you're bailing out." So it cut my career 10 years short anyway.
Oh, wow. And did that affect your pension or anything like that as well? Like, did you lose anything there?
Yeah, 10 years of pensions. It's not just the 10 years of service and the potential for promotions, the jobs that I was looking at, it affected both, yes.
Yeah, it ended your career completely. So can you transfer those skills somewhere else, or Alberta's your home and it's where you're staying and you're going to make do?
For sure. I know the RCMP are hiring right now, but I can't imagine, as you probably can right now, I've been blacklisted essentially from police, law enforcement jobs like that. There's no way anybody touched me in these current conditions, although I think everybody on the screen sees that the narrative is changing and more people are saying, oops, I think we overreacted there or made the wrong decision. So who knows? Well, that's why I'm here. This is not over. My point to continuing to speak out is that some people have to be held to account for what they did to not just me. There's cops that did stand up internally. I was the neck that they cracked, though. So it was clear, not just me. There was a couple of us, specifically another fellow named Constable Rob Kitchen, who was fired for something similar. He didn't fill out a piece of paper to say what his vaccination status was, and they fired him. So they made examples of us so that the others would fall in line, and it worked.
Absolutely. And I think what we're going to do here on this show is we're going to nominate you as commander of the Alberta Provincial Police Force. So when we actually get the Alberta Provincial Police Force, I would like to see you and people like you immediately recruited within that. And I think that's kind of what the mission is for a lot of us, is let's get Danielle to recognize that it's time to police ourselves. If Ontario, Quebec, and China can have police forces in Canada, we should as well. So I would absolutely nominate you as commander of that newly formed police force if we ever get there. Now, Donald, I think you were nodding your head and you were thinking around the same lines.
Oh, yes. And you know, now, I mean, we have Alberta and the federal government at odds over so many things. Same with Ontario. The federal government is interfering now in our greenbelt decisions we want to make. But you know what? Unless your police force is homegrown, you don't have sovereignty. You have no control. It's all out of Ottawa. I predict, gotta be 2-3 years, Alberta will have a provincial police force. And so it
I'd
should.
like to see. Yeah, so it should. And others as well. I think other provinces should do that as well. Because as we saw during the POEC, the OPP, Ontario Provincial Police, were actually pretty good on the ball. They had the right narrative and they had the right information. It was the other police forces, the OPS, the RCMP, the Parliamentary Police Services, those ones had a much different narrative. So I really enjoyed the fact that Ontario had a police force that seemed to really do a good job. And that showed me that we should be absolutely looking at that. Now, to provide a little more information here, Rick, first, I love the fact that you call it drugs. You don't call it vaccine. You call it drugs because that's probably closer to the right term. Vaccine is not the right term. So I'm going to continue to take your lead on that, and we'll call it the drugs. So you had the drugs, and you had no problem. Well, you may have had a problem getting it, but you actually had it. So your issue wasn't the fact that you wouldn't do it. Your issue was disclosing it, and your issue was how others were being treated. Because as you pointed out, there were some officers that made the decision not to do it, which then made them segregated. So you notice that they were not eating together. Now, my guess is they all had a good time, right? There wasn't a room with a shameful name on it that they were eating in. So they were, being treated normally, or was there a name to that room?
Actually, you just used the title of the room where the unvaccinated were forced to go. They called it the shame room from their squad mates. So, and you got to understand too how aberrant this was. They were sharing a police car together through a 12-hour shift, sharing the same steering wheel, sharing the same air, wrestling with the same bad guys, using the same computer. And then when they got back to break bread, they were forced into the superintendent's ante room. It was a boardroom off to the side, and it wasn't it wasn't those who didn't take the drugs that called it the shame room. It was some of their squad mates. So there were police officers that were supportive, and they jokingly said, "Oh, you have to go to the shame room to eat." Right. And those who were understanding would go eat with them in the shame room. Some of them would take their food and warm it up for them in the microwave in the lunchroom. They were supportive in that sense. But there is others on the other end. Don't forget, I divide everything into thirds. So there's the thirds that were against them. Some of them believe and would say openly in front of them, we don't think that those who didn't take the drugs should have access to healthcare. So if you get sick, we should just let you die at home. This is amongst police officer to police officer, openly saying these disgusting things in front of them. And I'm the one that got fired.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's what scares me, is within the police force. And we saw this with the Ottawa Police Services too. So during the convoy, they had this whole, you now need the drug or else you can't stay. So 20% of the police force went away. And then they used that as an excuse of saying, we're under-resourced. This is why we need to bring in other resources, including the Emergencies Act. These were all a part of the house of cards that they were putting together. But apart from the fact that they were low on resources or manpower or people power, whatever you want to call it now, they also removed people that had critical thinking and were willing to stand up for what they believed in. Now, that's a trait we actually do want in our police officers at all times, because they're supposed to have discretion on whether or not what they're doing is correct, including charter violations and stuff like that. So by having a police force who you've removed the critical thinkers and the ones that are willing to stand up, what you end up with is a highly commendable and compliant police force, which will do things that not necessarily even they agree with, but they'll still do it. Is that what you kind of saw happening with the Edmonton Police Services while you were there, as people were being shamed, pushed out, and eventually fired like you?
Oh, for sure. Don't forget, it's not just those like myself, like Constable Rob Kitchen, who were completely pushed out. That sent a reverberating message across the entire service. You speak up and we will sanction you for it. So it's more than just the couple of us who were pushed out. That went through the entire service. So that 1/3 who was vocally opposed to forcing anything, they were shut up real fast. Yes.
Yeah, and I can imagine then that attitude extended outside in the service. So when they're reaching people who are not masking, not vaccinating, and they're at a store or somebody's complaining about this person being there, immediately there's kind of like this built-in mentality that these people need to be shamed, just like the brothers and sisters at our department are being shamed. If they can be shamed, so can these citizens. I could imagine that mindset would have been very strong in a lot of officers while they're out in service.
Well, what you're speaking about there is called discretion, and police officers absolutely have discretion in everything they do. From interactions with public that you're speaking about to charges, whether or not they lay the charge based on the evidence that they have. There is room for discretion on all that, and absolutely, this isn't just from the EPS though. I don't want to blame them for that. Mm-hmm. This is really should lay at the foot of the mainstream media. The CBC, the CTV, and Global specifically, who had that effect on police officers. Police officers pull their pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. And I know Absolutely. They were disappointed. We expected them to stand up because they swore an oath and to tell the truth. But they have the same pressures as everybody else. They were over-mortgaged. This was a big one in my mind, as people that couldn't afford their homes. They saw these interest rates coming up. Yeah, you'll toe the party line. Now, whether or not the 1/3 that didn't believe any of it would exercise poor discretion on the public, I don't think I could say that. I hope to think that my squad mates that were awake, if I can use that term, would still use discretion in the public and not do illegal things or immoral things to those who chose not to wear masks, for instance. But on the other hand, we saw those examples that were videotaped in Calgary of those kids skating outside being arrested for being in the outdoors. You can't make this stuff up. So I have to give you some credit. You're right. The police were certainly losing discretion based on the narrative that was being pushed on them, not from just internally, but from the federal governments and their supporters inside the mainstream media.
Absolutely. And we can use your 1/3 there. So maybe 1/3 of them might have been a little bit more draconian. 1/3 would have been a little bit more understanding. And then maybe in the middle, a little bit different discretion based on what they're seeing. But I think you nailed it when you said media is where we got to pay attention on this one, because it was media who had that drumbeat going for so long. And if you're watching CBC and you're watching that kind of stuff, it's kind of hard not to fall into that trap. Now, this is kind of where we can transition to Coutts, because it was through the media that you started saying, wow, this vaccine drug stuff that they're making us do doesn't seem right. It seems a little bit off. And now they're also talking about Ottawa and Coutts and other stuff about these people. So your radar went up and you said, look, I like to see things myself. So first you talked to Danny, and he said, go take a look. And then you said, okay, so let me guess, you put on your best police outfit, you got your police car, you had the lights on, you went all the way to Milk River, let everybody know you're a police officer and you're there to watch them? Or did you show up with your sneakers and your jeans and a jacket because it was February?
Yeah, it was cold. No, it was a day off, and I showed up in, we call it civvy attire. I was not wearing a uniform on my day off. I enjoy my days off. And so when I got to Milk River, and to be clear about this, the reason why I thought somebody was lying is that there was that no middle ground. So you're right. I wanted to see for myself what was going on down there, and I was afraid, like I'm sure you were. I saw Milk River and Ottawa as a tinderbox with this division being sold to the masses about, and the hate of these people that were protesting being made out as hillbillies, hicks, non-believers in science, non-believers essentially. I saw the potential for violence down there. I've obviously been involved in many protests, and I'd never seen anything like it with that many Canadians being involved in protesting anything. So that was what I wanted to contribute to, is I wanted to be able to tell the truth, or at least spread the truth about what was going on down there, and I wanted to see it for my own eyes. So no, I went down in civilian attire. I was not there representing anyone but myself.
Absolutely. And you were there out of curiosity because you have suspicions and you wanted to see what they were about. Now, if you went down and you saw armed rebels that are being terrorists and completely destroying things and putting women and children as shields and stuff like that, you'd be reporting that back to us today, because that's what you would have saw. But what you ended up seeing, I think from your video, you saw a lot of teeth. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump to Granny pretty quickly here, because she's been around pretty early to these, what's been going on, and she's been paying attention. And she just had an event, a little gathering. Wasn't a protest and it wasn't a rally. It was just some people getting together for barbecue, where she saw similar things. So Granny, why don't you go ahead and tell us a bit about when you first got involved with Milk River or Coutts, and what the crowd looked like to you, because I kind of want to corroborate what Rick is saying here. You're muted, Granny. You're muted. Yep.
There we go.
Yeah, you're good now. Yeah.
So I was part of Ottawa. I was there from day one, right to the end. And what I saw was just wonderful, fun-loving, kind people. It was the best freedom festival you could have at -26. There was nothing but love and hugs. We policed ourselves. If we saw an agitator coming into the crowd, we made sure everybody stayed calm. And so when I was coming home, I had heard about Coutts. I'd heard about the arrests, and I thought, it has to be the same. It can't be any different. I witnessed the lies of the government and the media, because I actually saw the media with their cameras turned backwards to the crowd. We couldn't believe it. And unfortunately, we saw some bad behavior with the officers, which was very disheartening, because I didn't go there for violence. I don't believe in violence. I've never stood for violence. I don't even watch a violent movie. So when I was coming home, I had heard about the 4 men. Well, I didn't hear about the 4. I'd heard about many that had been arrested. And then in time, I'd heard about 4 men being arrested. So I honestly, and this is my opinion, I had never doubted these 4 men for a second because of what I had seen personally. But I'm after the truth. The truth is locked in a remand center right now, and it's not being allowed out. So when I found the 4 men and I found their families, they were terrified. They were confused, trusting nobody, because you can only imagine what they were going through. Right. So when we started raising awareness for this, more truth started coming out, and we started seeing more and more. And I've always said, we just want the truth. We're not looking for any magic wand. We just want the truth. And then I did see Rick's video, and it was like, there we go. And Rick was standing with these men unknowingly. One of them actually took him from Milk River to Coutts. And we're going to get into that.
Yeah, we'll get into that for sure, because it's a small world. And then Donald, you didn't go to Coutts or Ottawa. So you were watching from Toronto, correct? And
yes.
From your perspective, all you had access to was media, so mainstream and alternate media or independent media. So from your vantage point on this time, what was your perspective? Did you think the media kind of had it right? Maybe they were a little bit off, or they were way off? What were you thinking?
All right. Look, the media is just government propaganda, and nothing was more clear than looking at the reports on the ground from people, just ordinary Canadians. And there was one chap was up in his hotel room. He got a hotel room, and they put that camera on live 24 hours a day. And the difference in what we were seeing on the mainstream media and the truth of people just walking around with phones and video cameras was so devastating to the media that if you trusted them, when you looked at the 2 stories, you would never trust them again. And so many people have said that to me about not only the Freedom Convoy, but the whole vaccine coverage and the COVID coverage and everything like that. If the media is saying it, we now know it's probably just a narrative. Don't trust them. Look somewhere else.
Absolutely. And that was Danny's advice. Like, don't even trust him. Don't take his word for it. Go
That's
and
right.
look for yourself. And that's great advice, because you don't know where he's getting his stuff. And I think anybody that tells you that says, hey, look, I can tell you stuff, but please go look with your own eyes, because that's going to be the best way for you to trust it. That's somebody who understands what's going on as well. All right. So, Rick, so I'm going to come back to you now. So now we have you in Milk River. You're standing up on stage because you want to rally these troops to go ahead and take on the government and fight against them, right? No. What I saw was you were telling people the law, and you were giving people good information and asking them and encouraging them to stay very peaceful, because that's the proper way to continue with this. Now, my guess, Rick, is that when they saw that video, they weren't really paying attention to whether or not you were trying to break any laws and stuff. What I think they were upset about was your encouragement to this group to continue, even peacefully. I don't think they enjoyed that part of it, because you did provide them with the proper information, the legal information, and it basically armed them with the right way to protest. That might be what they were not so pleased about, because maybe they wanted someone to be silly, do something wrong so they can end it quickly, or something else. What do you think they latched onto on that video, other than accusing you wrongly of putting it on your social media? What do you think their reason for disliking that one was so harsh?
I can't speak to it. None of it makes sense to me today, even. But one of their excuses was that it was discreditable to be essentially hanging around with criminal types. So I want you to know, and not to disparage the Edmonton Klondike days too much, but you have to know who me and my family associate with. My kids have never been to the Edmonton Klondike days, because I never wanted them to be exposed to the gangs and the thugs that were often there during the celebrations at Klondike days in Edmonton. That's the local fair. Cops see the world differently, right? We look through the world with a weird filter, and we don't want to be associated to the criminal types or to any trouble on a day off. We want to just stay away from that. So that was one of the excuses of the Edmonton Police Service, was that I was hanging around criminal types who were unlawfully protesting in Milk River and Coutts. Now, don't get me wrong, and you know my story, but I did not speak in Coutts. They were unlawfully blocking an international border.
Correct.
And I told the fellas there they were getting arrested in Coutts. This is in Milk River where I spoke, where they were absolutely lawfully placed. Again, I see the world through a certain filter that ensures that I don't hang around with criminal types. And I told my wife that I'd love to take the kids down here for part of the party.
Oh, wow.
I'd love to have let them seen what Granny's talking about. I've never seen such a great Canada Day party in my life. It was for the kids, in fact, the protest. It was horsey rides, jumpy castles, and barbecues. So to your question again, I don't know what they were scared of. They said that it tarnished the image of the Edmonton Police Service, but even on the disgusting, aberrant mainstream media's feeds, when it was reported that I was suspended without pay, if this was a popularity contest, the comments in the CTV article were 2,999 to 1 positive. Thanks to at least some police officers are standing up and telling the truth. And then there would be one half-wit that would say, well, the police shouldn't be involved in these kind of things. But I think you're going to get to how the contradiction begins with Black Lives Matter protests that happened just a year earlier in Edmonton.
Yeah, I believe that you guys spent, was it $10,000 on knee pads for that one, so people can kneel down for all of those, because there was a lot of officers down on one knee for that all over the country. And that was, look, I am, where I take a position on that is protesters should be able to protest, get their message out. There should be a conversation. If they're terrorists, that's not a protest. But if they're Canadians and they're protesting, there should be a conversation. I believe the government should have liaison teams on all levels, and they should always be open to conversation. In fact, what you ended up doing there was basically a liaison for the police force. They didn't have one, but you kind of created one by providing to the citizens at least a face of authority that understands the law and says, look, as long as you do this, you'll be okay. If you start to cross the line and go in this way, like in Coutts, you'll be arrested. I think that sober second thought and that sober opinion was very valuable. And that might be what they didn't like, because they certainly wanted to vilify this group through the media. And maybe they didn't appreciate the fact that you were, observing directly what was going on, and then not directly reporting it, but someone else captured your little conversation with the crowd, and that kicked off everything. Now, let me ask you how you got to Coutts. I don't believe you walked there, and I don't believe there was a straight road for you. You had to get to Coutts maybe through back roads, and someone else brought you there. Can you kind of tell us how you got to Coutts?
Yeah, I'm from a rural upbringing. I know my way around township roads and range roads. I'm learning here today as we go that apparently according to Granny, one of the 4 fellows who were in jail was in a group that drove down there. So I was wanting to go see what was going on in Coutts. This was my decision because of what I'd seen in Milk River. Clearly, the story was not on. They were telling the wrong story in Milk River. So now I decided on the fly, I do want to see what's going on in Coutts, and I know my way there through the back roads. So I'd asked a number of people if the range roads down to Coutts were blocked, and they said no, you can get down there. So I actually, in my mind, found my own way down there by taking the range roads. And so to answer your question, even though I understand today there's one of the 4 that are still under arrest were in this group that went down there, I was just following what I knew to how to get there on my own.
Okay, so Granny, you want to fill in a little bit about that part, because you do have a little bit more information than even Rick knows about his journey to Coutts.
Well, obviously, because of the video, it did bring attention. And one of the fellas was part of that group that had went not with you, but with you down there. And they talked about the nice officer. And I even as of yesterday, I spoke with one of them, because I do speak with them regularly. They do remember you. They remember you as a nice man. And I find it kind of shocking that your opinion of the room was with them right there, that those 4 individuals, one of them wouldn't have been there for sure. He was sick. So 2 for sure, maybe even 3 were in that room mingling around. So when you said your comments, it was like, they're just normal family men. And so it just kind of reassured me that they are good men.
Yeah, and what Rick was mentioning is he's got that filter. So police officers have that filter, and they do not want to associate around any criminals or any seedy type at all. So Rick, well, now what I'm going to ask you is, did you get any, when you were in Coutts? Yes, there was an illegal blockade. Yes, what they were doing there was illegal. But let's talk about the characters you saw around you. Did you have your radar go up and say, okay, that guy is nefarious. This guy I've seen before. This guy I'm going to keep an eye on. Or was it more or less just the community coming together and you didn't feel threatened or have any problems with anybody?
No, yeah, I had no problems with anyone. And in my story, I think I had been speaking to an RCMP officer involved in the security there, and he'd asked me if I'd seen anybody that would look like the criminal types, and I'm telling you, there were none. Even at Coutts, these were farmers. Was the best way for me to describe people. Now, my filter did go off with one family. They weren't the criminal types. The best way for me to describe this fellow was that, how do you say this? He obviously was having relationship problems with his young family. And of course, some of these events will attract fringe characters. Sure. This wasn't a criminal type of fellow, though, that I'd say. It seemed to me that he was suffering from the ability to have good relations with his wife and kids. He was fighting with his kids. Okay. And I'd said that I saw one guy that's obviously having troubles with his family, but he didn't look like the career criminal type at all. So don't get me wrong. Had you had me on this show 2 years ago, I would have came up with every excuse on earth as to why police would charge anybody involved in these things. But now, since as we spoke earlier before we got online here, I've definitely been white-pilled. I'm definitely awake to things that are going on. And now I even have doubt in the system, like you. So
Right.
Anyway, to your question, no, absolutely not. I did not see criminal types. The ones that I spoke with at the border were family men, mostly. I would call them God-fearing people from a farming background.
Absolutely. And we'll just correct one thing. I believe you're black-pilled. So white-pilled means you have no hope
Thank
anymore. Yeah, black-pilled means you see the system for what it is, but there's a chance to fix it still. So yeah, I just want to put it out there. I want people writing the CBC might say he's going to white pill himself tonight. We don't want to put that out there. It's already good. But yeah, black pill. I think there's a lot of us that's on the black pill now. So you go from the blue, which is you just take it everything as face value. Then you go to the red, which means you're skeptical and you see that there should be some opposition to what's going on. And then the black is even the opposition's not doing their job anymore and the media's not doing their job. And then the red or the white is that's it. You're done. You think it's all gone. What we want to try and do is bring people from the white pill back to the black pill and keep a critical eye on things and keep moving forward. So your radar didn't go off. And as Granny's saying, you probably crossed paths with 2, possibly 3 of the gentlemen who are in jail now or in remand right now. Now, I'm going to ask you about that situation. So I'm assuming, because this is not part of your testimony, specifically around the Coutts Four men, but I'm assuming that you've been paying attention to what's going on there. So let's go ahead and quickly see what you know about it, and I'll see if you need to fill in any details, and then I'll ask you a few questions about the men. So, of course, you know they exist, but what else do you know about them at this stage?
You know, I have to be honest, I haven't been following that much at all. I have not been watching the Coutts Four, so I'm not up to date with what you're talking about from the testimony from the spokesperson from the RCMP. I know that there was a search warrant done where there were some firearms seized and that there's 4 gentlemen in jail still in remand waiting for trial based on some weapons charges. So I've seen the mainstream media pictures. I thought, like anybody else, they were a little bit suspect when they showed a table full of nothing. They showed a table full of vests, and I know they had the vest with the diagonal poster on it made the news that they're associated to that. But I do understand what diagonal is. It's actually very funny. So that's about as much as I know about the Coutts Four. And when I see the narrative around diagonal on there, I get suspect too. Like making a fictitious goat out to be a terrorist is funny.
It is. You're 100% right, and I was really pleased that you went that way. I loved how you said a table of nothing. So we refer to that table as a table with more questions than answers. We went through that table with a gun expert, and the most we can come up with is possibly one of the vests could be non-permitted in Alberta if it can stop a bullet or a projectile, because there's a rule around that, or a law around that in Alberta. And then possibly the cartridges are over capacity. But we have no other information. We don't know who's accused of having what on that table. We also understand that there are some seized guns that are not on that table. So there's a lot of suspect around that picture. So I'm glad you identified that as something that even your radar, your filter said, I don't see really a problem here. Maybe the bear spray, that might be a big giveaway here that these are hunters and this is hunting equipment. But yeah, I think we have the same mentality there. What I am going to do is I'm actually going to drop it down to Granny for a bit to give you a little bit of a Coles Notes version of the situation of where we're at today, because we're on day 508 or 9, I believe. So they've been there for quite some time. And one thing, Mr. Abbott, what I'm going to let you know is we actually had a pastor come in from the remand centers in Edmonton, and he explained to us how the remand center is really meant just to be a temporary thing. Either you're going to go on to the next step, which could be prison or straight up jail, or you're going to go home waiting for trial. It's not meant to be a long-term place, and these gentlemen have been there for 17 months now without bail and without trial. So Granny, if you don't mind, can you kind of just recap a little bit for Rick on where we stand today, and then I'll get back into his assessment of what he's seen.
Okay. Well, just to let you know who Chris, Jerry, Tony, and Chris are, they are 2 single fathers. a husband and father. The husband's not allowed to see his wife right now, and a only child to an 80-year-old mother. These are the suspects that are inside a remand jail for 508 days. And what's happened through the court process is the Crown has been just dropping and dumping disclosure on them with absolutely no organization within the thumb drive, no page numbers, no nothing. They've been through multiple lawyers. Some have been fired, some have quit. There's only one original lawyer from day one, and that's Jerry's. And to date, the trial was supposed to be June 12th. Right before June 12th, they got dumped more disclosure, and the defense had to adjourn it and postpone the trial. You can only imagine what that did to the four men. They had been counting days to June 12th. One of them actually had been counting meals, because the meals for him are horrible. He's got a gluten issue. So these men, that's how they've been surviving, is counting to June 12th. We've also learned of psychological torture called dead time. And when you don't understand or know when the date is coming for a release or anything, it is psychological torture. And I keep calling it that because that's what it is. The public, I've reached out to the public. I've asked for public support. I've had the public show up at the Lethbridge courthouse. We've said prayers. We've sang hymns. We're a very peaceful bunch. And we want to let the men know that we are there for them because they're very isolated. As you know, a remand is not a jail. And so we started a letter campaign that helped them mentally get through some of this. But it's very hard for them right now because it's been postponed. And now it looks like the trial is May, June of 2024. The one man broke down with me. He says, I'm going to miss my children's birthdays again. It'll be 3 birthdays he's missed with his children by the time they get to court. And he's one of the single fathers. And then as of the last court date, it was at like a pre-trial, something strange happened. It's always been about the man. It's always been, like video interrogations we've seen, and then there's applications filed. That's kind of what we had been seeing. And all of a sudden, it wasn't about the man. The original Crown did not show up. They were asked not to attend. A different Crown showed up, a different gentleman. And the conversation kind of went, the Crown will either be a defendant or a witness. And then it was asked that the RCMP brings counsel. And that's how we were left. That's how the last day went. And now July 25th, they will pick up again and we'll see what's going on. But that's how it ended the last day. None of us knows what's going on. It's rather confusing. There's a CC1 supposed to be filed. I don't even know what that means. I don't know if it's been filed yet, but it's under wraps. And the Crown didn't know what it was about. The judge doesn't know what it's about. And the defendant's lawyers are the ones that know about it. And it's in that's what they called a sealed envelope. So that's how we're left right now. And that's where we're at.
Thank you very much, Granny. So yeah, there's something that happened at the last court hearing. It wasn't related to the men, but it's related to the matter. And on the 25th, a whole bunch of us will be down in Lethbridge. If you're free, come join us. And we're going to stand and show some support to these men. Now, Donald, I'm going to ask you to do the officer-to-officer summary. So you've been at this for almost 2 weeks now. You came into this at the very beginning with a skeptical mindset because you want to make sure you do this properly. So why don't you give him a quick little officer-to-officer summary of what you've been through the last couple of weeks?
Well, I'm still skeptical. I mean, I want to see the evidence. And I've said right from the start that I'm coming into this trying to stay professional. I know a lot of people are emotionally engaged with these men, and I'm stepping back. I'm trying to be a professional investigator, professional detective. That said, after a week of evidence, looking at the evidence and looking at everything, I've come to the conclusion that bail has been denied to these men for political reasons. It's a political act to deny them bail. And why do I say that? Well, come on. This is Canada. everybody gets bail. Everybody gets bail. We have an accused cop killer out on bail in Toronto right now. We have people who are accused of setting numerous forest fires. We have people who've done drive-by shootings out on bail. Now, some of them have very tight conditions. They wear ankle bracelets, GPS locators. They can't talk with certain people. Maybe they have to stay in their home. They can't go out except for medical appointments in court, and they have to notify people when they do that. There's all sorts of conditions. But to have these men, 4 of them, in that context, continued to be denied bail, I've made up my mind that's a political act. Now, if one part of this is political, then maybe some of the charges and the evidence gathering were political. On February 14th, 2022, the RCMP spokesperson, a superintendent, got up and we looked at her video and everything yesterday. And I'll be kind. There were about 4 statements that were wildly inaccurate. If I was unkind, I'd say that she deliberately lied and that the entire thing was theater. Now, Rick, I don't know if you've seen that photo of the table of firearms. Yes, you have. I think the table of firearms and vests and things laid out. Now, we're talking about charges of conspiracy to murder RCMP police officers in support of an insurrection to overthrow the government of Canada. That's what the charges are alleged. So if you were in charge of kicking in a door, which you've done, and gathering evidence, which you've done, which we've both done, whether it's a serious charge or something that's a lesser seriousness, each piece of evidence is treated so that we can follow the continuity of it. We keep it pure. We don't mix it with other evidence. We put it in plastic bags or paper bags so that we can, and we handle it with gloves so that we can later do fingerprints or DNA testing. But I think you'll agree that when you look at that table, everything's got a toe tag on it. Nothing's in a plastic bag. They're all touching each other. And this was mere hours after they were seized. So they didn't treat this evidence with the respect and the professionalism it should have had. They weren't going to fingerprint it. They weren't going to do DNA on it. How can you when it's all mixed and everything? That was in my mind, that table was a political statement. It was just a press release where they ignored the rules of evidence to get a nice photo. And they put the RCMP car in the back. Oh, it was just wonderfully laid out. Look how important this is. And that photo was referred.
I think that photo was referred. I think CSIS kicked in right there. That photo was referred. Okay, so Donald, we may have lost you for a second there, and if you come back, we'll let you continue there. But here's what I want to say to you, Rick. So
Stand by.
Oh, yes.
Are we there?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. That photo was constantly referred to in the declaration of the Emergencies Act by the press and by the people in Parliament. Constantly referred to as evidence of my God, look at this, it's a terrorist act that we're going to. But what I see on that photo is not evidence. It's not proper handling of exhibits. And that tells me that this investigation was less professional than it could have been, and it was politically driven. Now, one more thing. I want to contrast that with the investigation into the horrific mass murders down east, where we had that fellow who dressed as an RCMP officer and went on a killing spree. You know, the commissioner of the RCMP attended a meeting with those homicide officers, which was recorded. Thank God they recorded it. And she pushed them, which they refused. She tried to push them to release the types of weapons and photographs of those weapons so that the government could use it for their political goals. She said it just like that. And they refused. They said, we're in the middle of a homicide investigation here, a mass murder. We're not going to tell the public the type of guns because we're following up where they came from, and there might be other people out there. Where did the guns come from? Who passed them? Where did the ammunition come from? We're not going to do it. And one of those RCMP officers had such integrity and courage that he released the whole thing. And if you talk to, the channels that both you and I have, one of the RCMP officers is alleged to have threatened the commissioner with arrest for obstructing police.
Wow.
Now, contrast that with the handling of evidence that's supposed to be evidence of a conspiracy to murder police officers in support of an insurrection to overthrow the government by violence. Well, in that context, the investigation was political. They staged that photo for political impact. Tells me everything I need to know. And so I came into this, and I still say, look, I don't know if these four men are technically guilty of this or that. I really don't know. But I know they're being held for political reasons. I know the evidence was staged for political reasons. That makes me wonder about the reason that they were charged. That's it. That's my analysis.
And what I'm going to ask you, Rick, is you recognize that the COVID drug narrative was wonky and off. You recognize that the convoy and blockage and Coutts stuff was wonky and off. Can you also recognize that maybe the evidence in the press release around this stuff is maybe also wonky and off?
Yeah, again, had you asked me this 2 years ago, I would have went into a full defense mode of my colleagues, saying that there's reasons why people get remanded. But this is where I will agree with Donald. And so two things can be true at the same time. I do believe that. These four could be charged, and there could be good evidence against them to say that they were conspiring to kill RCMP. And it better be juicy, is the other side of this story. It better be good, because nobody gets remanded like this. So Donald and I will share the same brain on this. You could hear it in his cop speak. We joke, nobody goes to jail in Canada. You have to do something super egregious to get remanded like this. When I was working at that time, we would catch people with firearms having just done robberies. We'd do our best to put a package together to get them remanded, and every day of the week they would be released by the Crown prosecutors and by the justices. Within the next 24 hours, we come back to our next night shift. That guy that had the gun that did a robbery at the 7-Eleven, they're out. They're out on bail. We're truly threatening people with the firearms. So that stinks to me. So what I'm saying is it better be good. I hope that my colleagues within the RCMP are doing this investigation with utmost integrity. But again, two things can be true at the same time. I'm, like everybody else, wondering what's going on with what they showed on that table. And I do agree that some of this is theory. You've seen us show arrests where we make big seizures of drugs. It's good press for the police to show kilos and kilos of cocaine stacked up beside firearms in search warrants that we've conducted. This, I'll agree with you, is different. And what cued me onto it is how they noticed that the diagolon, they were using the diagolon flag to further damn these men. Now, I'm with you. I'm suspect as well. But again, I have to be objective, just like Donald. As an investigator, I can't tell you how many times we've done an investigation where there's holdback information to the public that I hope is here on this in one sense, so that the public can maintain their trust in the police. But if there isn't holdback information that we're not getting that comes out here eventually, then that is going to hurt the public's trust of the police.
Absolutely. And what we got was the press releases at the time, and they pointed the finger squarely at Jeremy McKenzie of being a leader of a far-right terrorist group, and they're using the ideologically motivated extremists, violent extremist ones, for that. Since that press release, which was in February of 2022, we've had the POEC, where Jeremy testified. The government did not prove any of those statements to be true, did not prove that Jeremy or his group has done anything illegal or violent. In fact, what we found out from that testimony was they didn't even sell the patches. Those were made by people who were just fans of the comedy that they do. And what we also found out from the POEC is there hasn't been one single charge to one single person that considers themselves a member of the Diagolon family or the Plaid Army. Not a single charge for any of them to date related to anything to do with extremist violence, charges against the government, trying to overthrow the government. Nothing like that's happened, Rick. What has happened is they've been debanked. They've been unable to get on with life. They've been deplatformed, and there's a bunch of stuff going on even to today. We should get some more information later in July what's going on with that. But to date, Rick, no charges to that group at all, because as you know, you don't charge people for comedy because they haven't done anything other than that. Now, Granny, what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw you on and ask you about, first, I'm going to ask you if you have any questions for Rick, because while we have them, now's a good time to get them out. And then maybe tell Rick on what we're doing with this mission, why we're getting together with this show.
Well, first, I'd like to thank Rick for telling the truth and sharing the truth before, and thank him for coming on to the show. The four men appreciate anybody coming forward and speaking the truth. And that's all they want to do. They just want their day. I'm not saying it's a perfect truth. I'm saying it's the truth. And it's for individuals that have their truth that has been locked inside a remand jail for 508 days. Even the criminals, the repeat offenders are coming in and they're saying, you're still here? Like the advice given by the criminals was, if you've got $5,000 and you get this lawyer, you'll get out. Well, it's to date, probably around, between all of them, it'll be well over $600,000 at least. That's on the low end that has been spent. And they're still inside. And there's no date outside of May, June for them to get out. So what we're doing is we're coming together on July 25th, peaceful, respectful. Everything we do represents these four men. We'll dress in white and we will just show unity and show public support, because that was kind of the gist of it. We don't want to lose faith in the public, so we got to keep them inside. Well, I think by keeping them inside has backfired on them, because the public is waking up. Tens of thousands of people across this country are seeing these men and they want them out. Like, just let them out. This is enough. Your message has been heard. We're not having it anymore, but we don't know what to do now. Like, this is really sad. The families feel very lost. They want their loved ones out. And so July 25th, if you're free and you want to stand and have a coffee with Jason at his podcast, please come down. You'll see a lot of gray hair there. A lot of us stand up with gray hair. So it's not nefarious in any way. So thank you for what you're doing. And my family thanks you for speaking up.
Absolutely. And I also thank you as well. But what, as you saw, Rick, was in the Edmonton Police Services, they made an example out of one officer to kind of send a message to the rest of the police force that even if you are like-minded and even if you want to do that, don't. I think this is a big message to Canada that if you want to stand up to the government, like these four men may have done, you could look at this kind of outcome as well. So this might be another one of those messages to the public, much like you had with within the Edmonton Police Services. What do you think about that? And I don't know what your schedule's like, but if you can make it out on the 25th, I'd love to shake your hand.
Yeah, like I say, I'm trying to be objective here, and I know no details of that case. So that's the part that stinks to me, is that if there's no evidence coming forward to explain why these fellows have been in jail that long or have been in remand that long, that doesn't make sense to me. On the other hand, like I say, I'm still a cop at heart, and I think we are cops forever. Where I come from, nobody, it's not like the movies, or nobody gerrymanders evidence to fake things like this. So two things could be true at the same time. I hope to God that there's something that's going to come out in disclosure that would justify keeping these four guys in jail for this long. But until we see it, I agree with you on that sense. And the public kind of is obviously looking to know why these guys are still in jail. So yeah, I'm riding the fence on this. I get that, but I'm trying to be as objective as I can.
Absolutely. And that's the right way to be. And that's why we would like you to stick around and maybe chat with us again another time, and maybe spend a little time looking into it as well. If you continue to watch this show, we'll keep bringing those details to you. But what we want to make sure is we do talk about this properly. So I really love the fact that you're taking your cop hat and you're keeping it on. And I love the fact that Donald's doing that as well. And even Granny's doing that, because there's stuff about the court matters that we can't talk about that we would love to, because it might make everybody a lot more excited, but we can't. We have to follow the rules and the laws and the order of the court. So there's a lot of information yet to come out. I did want to highlight one thing to you, Mr. Abbott, and that is the POEC. So they had enough time to investigate themselves, the RCMP and the government of Alberta and the government of Canada. They had enough time to investigate themselves and put together enough evidence for the POEC to clear themselves on this matter. So I'm curious what information that they used to clear themselves on the POC that hasn't made their way into the Coutts matter itself, and what information did the defense find? Because they did file a CC1, which is an application. It can mean anything. What the application's for, it could be anything. But it was enough to have the Crown attorney not show up and be replaced, at least temporarily, with someone else, while the conversation about whether or not his conduct thus far has rise to the level of. And one thing Granny forgot to mention was the Law Society of Alberta is also involved. So they're looking at something on that would have to be misconduct on a professional level if the Law Society is involved. But these are the things that we're looking at. So you didn't mention the 25th or not, but maybe we can get an interview with you on that day if you can't make it down or something, because what I'd like to see happen is people understand that there is a lot of support of all types of people there, including somebody with integrity like you. You muted yourself, or CSIS did.
We'll keep in touch in the meantime. Again, I'll have to say I'm riding the fence on issues like this. I still, even though I'm not in the police service right now, I still wear a cop hat. I will forever. And good. I'm never going to use the colors of the pills again, because I get it wrong every time. Yeah. I am hopeful. So what I'm saying is I hope that our courts aren't that corrupted that these guys would be held in remand for political reasons. But we have seen it with, so let me use another story that's topical today. So I will side with you, I guess, in one sense, that look what happened to Tamara Leach. There's no way to look at that other than a political arrest. There's no way. Yeah, it's a great read, by the way. I did purchase
just showed up yesterday.
Everybody should get one. There's no way to interpret that then as a political reason to keep her in jail. She would have met all of the conditions for release, and had she breached them, her past behavior would have shown exactly how they would have brought her back into remand. It would have been a phone call. Ms. Leach, you've breached your conditions. Please show up at this location. You're going back to jail. And we would only have to believe that she would have showed up to go back to jail. So there you go. We have seen political interference in remanding with Tamara Leach. So I hope that our governments and our courts come out and clear this up sooner than later so that there isn't more doubt put into the system. We've had enough doubt for the next 50 years.
Absolutely. And what the comment, and you're a police officer, you like to investigate, and sometimes you look for patterns and things that connect. Well, in this one, you have the Jeremy McKenzie, Saskatchewan stuff, you have the Tamara Lynch stuff you just mentioned, and you have these 3 or 4 men as well, all under Commander Lucky. So they all go to one spot who can make decisions around this kind of stuff. Not pointing blame, we're just stating the fact. She was the commander during all of these, and things were being held or done not normal, especially for Tamara to be picked up from home by the RCMP, flown across country on a Canada-wide warrant to spend Canada Day in jail. Other than maybe trying to provoke a response or upset some people or send a message, I'm not sure what else the value in that would have been for the government, because I'm sure the government didn't feel threatened by her in Alberta. And I think she was in Red Deer at the time, and there was no reason to take her like that. But I think you're highlighting something here. You're highlighting big question marks, and that's what I would expect from a police officer, is to identify question marks and try and search for answers. So may I be so bold and ask, maybe you can come back again sometime in the future, give yourself some time to look at this, think about this, and maybe come back. I'm not looking to change your mind. I actually like the way you have your mind set up. I'm just looking to maybe work a little bit more with you on that over the next coming weeks. Is that something I can maybe reach out to you on?
Absolutely. We need to speak about these things. And this is why it's so important to have free speech advocates. My free speech was taken from me. So we're not going to agree on some of this from our different experiences, and I don't mind talking about it, and I think it's important that we talk about it. So absolutely, I'm open to that, and maybe we'll learn something in the meantime.
Excellent. And that's all we can really ask for at this stage. We don't have all the information. They haven't disclosed the stuff to the public. A lot of it is protected under seal, like Granny mentioned. And also the defense themselves has a media ban on this because they're worried about the narrative being too strong to the jury pool. So a lot of this is still being done behind closed doors, and we don't have all the information. And you're not wrong. The two things would be right at the same time. Maybe they said a little bit too much. Maybe they bragged a little bit too much. Maybe they implied a little bit too much. And maybe they were a little bit too angry with events during that day, because this is all when the EA was coming down and being threatened to come down. So, maybe tempers were high. Aside from that, we believe in innocent until proven guilty. We believe that there should be a trial, and we believe that if there's a jury of peers that are reviewing this, it should be decided by them, not by the media and not even by us. But we're not at that stage here, Rick, and we're still trying to get ourselves there. So thank you very much for a commitment to keep an eye on this. Most of the public forgot. I think even you admitted a bit, you kind of lost touch with what was going on here. But thank you very much for showing up today, spending that time with us. And frankly, Rick, doing what every officer should have done. And if every officer acted the way that you did the entire time, I don't think there would have been a shame room. And I don't think you would have been fired. I think you would have been awarded, because what you're actually doing is what the integrity of your job requires. So thank you very much for doing that and taking the big hit of losing your job, losing your career, and losing the future that you were building. I do hope that Alberta Provincial Police becomes a thing. And I do hope to see you in a uniform again, wearing all the bars that you deserve. So thank you very much, Rick, for joining us on that.
Thank you. And if I can leave you with some hope about that Alberta Provincial Police, if you build it, they will come. So here would be a great opportunity for the Premier to see that if they build a provincial police service here, I know cops from across the nation who lost their position for holding up for their view of what were their charter rights. They will come to Alberta, and you will build a police service that will be accountable, that will have integrity. And there's some young guys out there, despite this gray beard of mine that I'm going right now, we've still got lots of years left in us. And they will come from across the nation if we build that police service. So that's what I want to leave you with for hope. And because I am on the side of hope, we can change this. And the policing is going to be a cornerstone to that. I know they're working on Alberta Health Services right now. I think the next step is to have a police service that serves the needs and the culture of Albertans and not Ottawa.
Absolutely. And I'd like to see you involved in that, up there in the ranks for sure. So Granny, you like that hope message? There are people coast to coast. If we build it, they will come. And by far, what I think we'd end up with in Alberta is the most police force with the highest integrity ever, because we actually starting off with the high integrity people. I am for this.
Well, thank you, Rick, for that message. I've got 2 grandsons, and this is why I do what I do. Is I stand up for my grandsons' rights and freedoms, and hearing that gives me hope for them and my family. So thank you for that. And thank you on behalf of the men to everybody that's watching and everybody that's out there cheering for them. And again, we just want the truth. All of us want the truth. Whatever that truth is, we just need to hear it. And it's being held back. So until we get the truth, we'll keep doing this show and we'll keep standing up. So thank you, everyone that takes part either in the show or watching the show.
And sharing the show. So if you share, you get more viewers on and they can hear Rick's message and Don's message and, of course, yours message, Granny. And Don, thank you very much for your connection. There's something about this divine intervention where a long time ago, Rick was reaching out to find officers and people in the profession that had integrity. Something brought him to your website. He reached out to you for whatever reason, and yada yada yada, we get to speak with Rick. So thank you very much, Don, for doing what you do, attracting people like Rick and coming together with us as well. Thank you, Don. And you want to say some closing comments to Canada, maybe a little bit of hope, maybe extend it about what Rick said there?
I'm very optimistic. People are waking up. The longer this goes on, I'm talking about the four men now, the Coutts Four. The longer this goes on without the kind of evidence that should be on the table, that should be before us, more people are waking up about this. So look, Rick will make up his mind. He's just new to it. I didn't care about the Coutts Four a month ago. I really didn't. Wasn't on my radar. But now that I've had a good look at it, I know they're being held as a political decision. What I want to know now is, what about those charges? What about the evidence gathering? How much of that was political? And I think we're going to find out. And I think, as Rick says, we want evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And we hope that this investigation was done with integrity. Well, my hope is slipping. We'll see.
Absolutely. And what I'm going to highlight here is there are other forces at play. So there is something going on with the legal system. There's something happening right now as we speak. The judge is opening up a sealed envelope and taking a look at it. Law Society is involved. The RCMP have been told to lawyer up. A certain Crown prosecutor is no longer welcome in the court at this stage. So something else is going on here. So I have a lot of faith that the justice system, it might be moving very slow on this one, but I think it's going to go slow and then quick. All of a sudden, we're going to see something happen possibly.
You know, I've been in and around the courts now. Next year it'll be 50 years I've been in and around the courts as you know, and never before in those 50 years have I ever heard the phrase, the Crown might be a witness or he might be a defendant. Yeah. I've never heard that before in my life. There's something going on here. I think Canadians deserve to know what it is.
Absolutely. And the sooner the better, because we are talking about 3 fathers and a only child. So there's families that miss these gentlemen and want them back. And Rick, one of the conditions was there's a wife and a husband that can't speak. They won't even let them talk. So something's not right here. This is a mental game. I think they're trying to break them, and they're trying to make a message to the rest of Canada. Unfortunately, I think Don is completely correct. As more time goes on, Canadians are waking up, and a lot of them are getting black-pilled, not white-pilled, but they're getting black-pilled. So thank you very much, Rick, for all of this. We will be in touch. I did speak to you about having you on for my interview show, so we'll find some time for that as well, because I think you have an incredible journey and an incredible story I want to get into. But thank you all very much for your time. Donald for the connection, Granny for liaisoning and bringing these messages from the man. I really appreciate it all. So I'm going to wrap up and thank you all, and we will connect again everybody come back. You'll see Donald and Granny tomorrow. And tomorrow is family day for everybody, Rick. So if you tune in tomorrow, you're going to meet some of the family members of these men, and you're going to hear stories about the men. We're not going to get into the law tomorrow, but we're going to get into the family. So if you want to learn about these gentlemen, that would be a good one. And we also have all the previous episodes, Rick. It's kind of like Netflix. You can watch them all and chill if you want. But there's several hours of good information. I think it will help you on your journey on discovering what's going on with this case as well. So thank you all very much for your time. And I'm going to wrap up. Bye, Granny. Bye, Rick. And bye, Donald.
Take care. Have a good day.
Thank you. We'll talk soon. Wow. Divine intervention comes up a lot on this show. It's something that Granny brings up. It's something that I bring up because, quite frankly, I'm not sure how this is happening. How is it we're getting the people that stand out and say, hey, look, this wasn't right. My spidey senses, my police senses, my investigation senses went up. He saw even the police force itself bully police officers. A lot of them stayed quiet because they saw what would happen. They will be fired. They will be reprimanded. They will be eating in the shame room. These are the police officers on police officers. This is scary to me because these same police officers hit the street. And like Rick said, it's not 100%, right? There's about a third that might be heavily for it, a third in the middle, dealing with it, and then a third that don't like it. So it's a crapshoot on who you're going to get on the street. Are you going to get that officer that thinks that healthcare is something you shouldn't deserve if you're not going to follow the requirements and mandates? Is that the officer that pulls you over and sees you without a mask, or starts, maybe you make a comment about us purebloods or something along those lines that make him realize you're not vaccinated, and then the dynamic changes? As Rick said, the officers have discretion, and that's a powerful thing. But it works both ways. The discretion could be to do the right thing, or the discretion could be to make a statement and punish you or do something. Those aren't allegations to the police officers, but that is the discretion that they do hold. So I hope you liked that interview. We did run a little bit late because, quite frankly, there's some good information there, and I didn't want to cut it short. But we will be having Rick back. My goal with him is maybe bring him back once every week or every second week as he's learning more information and has more to share from his mind as well. We do know that maybe there is a charge or two that's legit. We're not saying they're 100% innocent, and we're not saying that there's complete corruption here. But what we're saying is there's very, very big indicators that they're treated very differently. And like Rick brought up, like Tamara Lynch, he saw some problems with the bail and conditions and the way they treated her. So it's the same police force, RCMP, dealing with this. So we're going to keep doing this. We'll keep bringing you guests like this. We'll keep having conversation like this. And like Rick said, we should keep talking. So thank you all very much. Sorry we didn't get to your chats today. Paula's been doing her best putting it up there. But thank you, Clay, for showing up so I can have my coffee. And thank you to everybody in chat. It's growing, growing, growing. Share, share, share. This is working. We are able to get people like Rick on and have conversations that are just as important as any other out there. But we're doing it from a fifth wheel, Starlink, in the middle of the bush. And I thank you all for being here for that. You guys take care, and you know how I feel about you. I love you all, and God bless.